the plan put forward by Trump and his team is essentially a plan of surrender to Hamas. It's a pretty bad deal that they have to basically hand over all of their captives on faith that Palestinian captives will be released and that the genocide won't just resume again. And then there's all this talk of Tony Blair overseeing Gaza
Wow.
and different things.
Zero irony. Zero
Yeah,
irony giving
what do you make of
zero
this
irony.
proposal and what's happening right now? Of course, we want the bombs to stop, and it seems to be the only way. And Hamas seems to have given a way of threading the needle in its response, but it's a very precarious situation. So, what do you think is happening right now?
I want to address first this thing about genocide. I know for my Palestinian siblings, this is so frustrating because we have a name for it. It's Nakba. And this ongoing, what do you call it? And making that the primary argument. It's like almost a distraction. My goodness, call it what you want. And the only thing I will say in response to that why that still, despite my deep frustrations, why that still unfortunately remains relevant is because this is literally about the legitimacy of Israel's attack on Palestinians in Gaza, right? If this is a war, right, then it features, nobody's in denial. Even the apologists for Israel who deny there's genocide will admit that it features war crimes and crimes against humanity, but ultimately want to defend the legitimacy of the campaign. Genocide indicates that it is not a legitimate campaign because whereas in warfare, the military goals are legitimate to achieve as long as they meet, right, laws of war and, prohibitions in international criminal law that protect civilians, that those military goals are legitimate. What those of us who have insisted that it's genocide, we're saying that the goal of the campaign is the destruction of the Palestinian people, which is never legitimate. Hence, everything else is cover, right? The destruction of Hamas is cover. The retrieval of the hostages is cover. Because were those, in fact, the actual goals, there were other ways to achieve that far earlier, especially given that Hamas by October 10th, 2023 said, take back all the civilians. We want to keep the military captives because that, but take back the civilians. This wasn't, and they refused. And so the purpose here has been the destruction of the Palestinian people, specifically in order, when they say they want to destroy Hamas, they want to destroy in Palestinians the audacity to resist in any way. And the only way to destroy that is to destroy Palestinians, to remove them. So that's why that becomes, so relevant. For Palestinians, for those we've been studying this, we see it, we live it, because we understand Nakba, we understand genocide, because we understand settler colonialism, we understand native elimination. And it was, easier for us quickly. I mean, you can immediately, and I've been, I went to Gaza in the aftermath of the first large scale onslaught in 2008, 2009, so early in February 2009, with a legal delegation to investigate war crimes. And so I've been looking at this closely throughout the systematic war. And so knowing full well what was about to come and how Israel had changed the laws of war in the course of these attacks and all of the talking points that they had, we already knew what they were. So that's how we could respond. And we're able to say that in a way where those who were removed, who weren't paying attention to Palestine, are first and foremost taken by, what Hamas did, the attacks on October 7th. And that becomes their primary compass. That becomes the beginning of history. Gaza has no geography. It floats outside of Palestine. It floats outside of the Middle East, period. Right? Hamas has no history. All of a sudden, and even the sympathetic at the top wanted to insist, as they did with me on many interviews, can you come onto the program and explain why all Palestinians are not Hamas? And I would refuse and say that's a very racist line of questioning. Let's say all Palestinians supported Hamas. How does their support change their civilian status to make them into legitimate targets? Right? And so there was just this emphasis of somehow the refusal to even engage. Like, who is Hamas? When are they founded? What is and so I think that has been the primary frustration. Look how far we've gotten anyway. I mean, of course, I say the we, but it's Palestinians that have been samadu, who have been so steadfast, because they have been so steadfast and suffered something that no one should suffer. No mother, father, no parent should suffer the loss of their children in the systematic slaughter. That now, it's propaganda wasn't enough. And now repression isn't even enough. So now we're at the point where they've presented this proposal that's full of illegalities, Sharif. It's full of, all of it is illegal, all of its terms, aside from the vagueness. But the part that stands out so starkly for me is the way that it whitewashes genocide. It's as if that hasn't happened. There's no accountability for Israel. Only Hamas, right? Hamas has the imperative to demilitarize and to step down from power. There's no accountability for Israeli individuals who incited genocide, who orchestrated genocide. There's no accountability for any of the weapons manufacturers that provided the technology in order to, deliberately target Palestinians. There's no accountability for the media corporations who incited genocide and repeated lies. There's no accountability for heads of state like Biden, who repeated the lie that he saw 40 beheaded babies twice that never exist in pictures that never existed. There's no accountability, period. And that part, what they're trying to do is to rehabilitate and save Israel in this moment in a way that is full of illegalities and that will set us up in what you call surrender, but what becomes a permanent occupation that is even more severe than preceding October 7th, because it explicitly bifurcates Gaza from the West Bank. It's not a holistic whole. It will not be governed by Palestinians at all. Their right to self-determination doesn't exist. Even the mention of Palestinians to stay in Gaza, right? That's kind of what the Arab states supported and wanted to see. They're not even referred to as Palestinians. Gazans will be able to stay in Gaza and live a good life. Those are Palestinians staying in Palestine. And that, for those, I mean, I guess if we're going to get into the legal part of it, the vagueness of language here, read through, a legal eye, aside from the illegality, right? Because all of this is, there are preemptory norms of self-determination, for example, that should be heeded, that are not here, and so on and so forth. But the UN is supposed to oversee the end of occupation, not Israel and its allies. Aside from the illegalities, I mean, just looking at the terms of it, and you allude to this, the lack of specificity is deliberate. It was the same lack of specificity in 1967 around Security Council Resolution 242 in the line that stipulated that Israel will withdraw from territories recently occupied. It was the lack of the definite article "the" or "all the" preceding all of the occupied, all of the territories recently occupied. Israel has used that loophole since 67 to basically say that as long as it withdrew a little, it's fulfilled the Security Council resolution, right? They withdrew from the Sinai, which is such a vast land that they say that it exceeds the Gaza and the West Bank, and therefore fulfilled their obligation and can stay in the Golan Heights in Gaza and the West Bank, right? But in Oslo, we see the same thing. It was the lack of specificity. It was the tabling of the 5 permanent status issues of settlements, Jerusalem, refugees, borders, and why do I always forget the 5th? Did I say Jerusalem?
Jerusalem, right of
Jerusalem,
return.
refugees, settlements and settlers, borders. Let me leave it at 4 for now.
Yeah.
I mean, suffice, that Those are left off the table. But that lack of specificity is precisely why the outcome that we have now, somewhat 32 years after Oslo, is precisely what Oslo had stipulated. It's not despite Oslo, it's because of Oslo. And so here we have another agreement that's setting us up for another God knows how many decades of violations and law in law and atrocity against Palestinians that will not remain stable, right? But that ultimately saves Israel at this moment of reckoning and allows them to continue this harm, these systematic violations with impunity. That's where we're at. And the worst part, I agree, Hamas did thread the needle. They had to, because even the General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, endorsed this plan. The Arab and Muslim states endorsed this plan. Yesterday at the Security Council, it was celebrated, right? I understand everybody wants the end to the genocide. Palestinians more than anyone, they need to eat and sleep. But it's coming, it's almost surrender, because they're basically saying we have no other power to do it any other way besides the way that the US is dictating. US and Israel are dictating, even if it sets up this horizon. And so the message that I have is that the worst thing that can happen after now is for us to relent. Already the EU has suspended its talks over sanctions on Israel in light of the plan. Right now, all attempts at accountability will be framed as undermining peace. We can't impose sanctions on Israel because that might undermine the peace plan. We can't prosecute war criminals. That might undermine peace plan. We can't continue at the ICJ. We can't continue at the ICC. And we have to make that impossible by not relenting.